It's Friday. You see Charles Robinson. You see Frank Schwab. You know it's inside coverage. I'm Jason Fitz. That means it's Feisty Friday. I don't know what we're going to argue about, but I know we're going to argue about something because things always get heated. Gentlemen, I am particularly excited. We got a lot we're going to get into. We're going to get into some of the big free agent deals, some of the deals we haven't seen yet. But I want to start with the draft because, frankly, guys, we all worked on the draft last year together, right? And we did the Yahoo live stream. I'm sure we'll be back again this year and better than ever doing it again. And I just sit here and I have to remind myself, C-Rob, it's been a long time since we've seen a Shedeur Sanders. And by that, I mean, usually even by now, we have a sense. Last year, we had a sense. We all knew who the top 3 picks were going to be and the order they were going to go in. Like, there was no great speculation. I read these mock drafts. I listen to the draft shows of Football 301 doing their big boards. I'm listening to all of this stuff. And there is no general consensus on Shedeur. And I feel like that's pretty stunning at this point in the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's the quarterbacks are kind of a mess right now. I think there's a general consensus across the league that Cam Ward is obviously the number one. But there's just this massive gap between Cam and Shedeur. And there's a much smaller gap, I think, perceptually, between Shedeur and maybe Jackson Dart and others in the quarterback field. And I think it's creating some chaos right now to the point where, Jackson Dart pops up at 3 in a mock draft, getting drafted ahead of like Travis Hunter. And you're like, this seems crazy. Shedeur is being mocked at 2 to the Cleveland Browns by people who know what they're doing with their mock drafts. And then in other places, you see him mocked in the lower third of the first round by people who historically know what they're doing with their mock drafts that have a really good ability to take the temperature across the league. So to me, I think what's happening right now, and I talking to people across the league, they agree. Shedeur Sanders is the story of this NFL draft, and it's going to linger all the way to draft day. This idea of like, where is he going? How far could he fall? What are the different value assessments of Shedeur Sanders? And, this week I sent out just a huge wave of texts to guys across the league. I'm talking coaches, GMs. I'm talking agents that have quarterbacks either in the draft or also in free agency. And I said, am I wrong to think that this mass sort of confusion or inability to nail down exactly where Shedeur could end up is going to end up lasting all the way to draft day and being this draft story? Everyone came back and said, I agree. In some way, shape, or form, the response, everyone who responded said they believe that that's actually the case. And we can kind of talk now about how that's going to unfold. But to me, there's no doubt Shedeur is the story of the 2025 draft. He's going to be the story of the 2025 draft when Roger Goodell comes out and opens the draft. I think we're still going to be sitting there going, we think at that point we know where he's going, and that may change.
Let me ask you real quick, because this is fascinating to me. Because, like you said, Shedeur, it seems like it could go anywhere from 2 to 32, right? Like it just, is that more?
Or the second round. Right?
Crazy. Because I don't think it would be absolutely weird for Shedeur to go number 2, right? Like I've watched him. I'm based in Colorado. I've seen a lot of Shedeur Sanders. I think he's a good player, but yeah, maybe, but there are flaws there. So I think the question from me to you is, do you think this uncertainty is driven by Shedeur Sanders as a player and the flaws he has as a player, which there are some, or the personality stuff we've heard about, not just in the combine, but even before that, the Deion show comes with this. I mean, we know it's a Sanders family. Like there's a lot that goes on with this other than, I mean, you got the social media stuff. How much is playing? How much is he off the field?
It's a great question. And I think it's answered differently depending on a team's vantage. I had one executive say to me, and I thought this was pretty interesting context, just in terms of their mental outlook on him, is, he said to me, what bothers me is he's a good college quarterback who already carries himself like he's an elite NFL quarterback. And he said that's scary because you wonder, he thinks he's made it already. He hasn't made it. He's so far from making it and doesn't seem, at least in their eyes, doesn't seem to understand that it certainly impacts how they perceive him as a potential leader, right? But that's only one little small part of the equation. The film is a much bigger part of that equation. The personal interviews are going to be a much bigger part of that equation. The background work on him. So to answer your question, Frank, I think it's a lot of different things, and you will get an emphasis on him that's different from different teams, right? So I was talking to a general manager this morning, and I asked him, it was the same question, basically, am I wrong to think he's going to be the story of the draft? And why is there this mass confusion? And he gave me great context. He said, when you look at how the draft unfolded last year, he said the Atlanta Falcons went and they signed Kirk Cousins. They gave him $100 million guaranteed. And then all of a sudden, late in the draft process, the Falcons send this delegation out to Washington to work out Michael Penix. And it wasn't a small delegation. It was like the heavy hitters, the people you send when you're going to draft this guy. And at that point, across the league, the thought process was, okay, maybe I think he's going to be there in the second round. So they're going to bookend their quarterback position with the veteran they signed and then a rookie in the second round who they can bring along for the next couple of years behind Kirk Cousins. There was no thought whatsoever that they could take Michael Penix, realistically take Michael Penix with the 8th overall pick in the draft. And then that's what happened. And that was really the all bets are off moment in the NFL when it comes to stacking quarterbacks in NFL drafts. And I think his point was the reason why that happened is because we failed to recognize that in desperate situations, teams will now attack the quarterback position in a multitude of ways. That includes spending big time capital in free agency, but also big time capital on the draft board in the same cycle. And I think part of what he was pointing to is the Browns. You have the Browns, they're sitting there at number 2. They could absolutely go out and sign a veteran quarterback. Maybe it's a Kirk Cousins because of the fact that he's still getting paid by the Falcons. You could sign him cheaply, although I doubt Kirk would want to come in because he's going to sit there and go, you're just going to draft a rookie. And I'm going to have the same thing happen in Atlanta. It's going to happen. This is going to happen again to me. But the Browns could absolutely address with a veteran quarterback and then take a Shedeur Sanders, say at number 2 in the draft. We can no longer fail to recognize that desperate teams will take desperate measures and do things that seem wildly out of character from a building perspective. And I thought it was interesting that the way that he really shaped this up, because I had heard literally the night before, yesterday night, I had another league executive that said, look, I think the Giants are a team, they're going to throw the kitchen sink at the quarterback position. He's like, I think if they had gotten Matt Stafford, they still would have drafted a rookie quarterback, potentially
as they should,
a Cam Ward.
Yeah. Right. So we do need to rethink the quarterback position in the NFL. Yes, we made fun of the Falcons, and the Falcons are looking pretty good right now. But go on, yes.
But that leads to that sense of confusion because normally, in some sense, teams are like us, where they sit and they analyze it and they go, well, let's just sensibly look at how is their team stacked right now. Where is the money? What kind of guarantees do they have? Where's the runway at the quarterback position? And up until I think really last year, it was this linear line of thought. Well, it's like, well, if you have one starter, you have one starter. So the person behind that starter, you're not going to spend a huge asset on that unless you only have your one starter for, let's say, a season. No, you could have your one starter locked in for, $100 million of guaranteed money and still spend the 8th overall pick in the draft and then pull the plug on that starter before his first season is even over. Once that happens, it changes the way that teams kind of assess things. And I think a lot of that is getting into this process with Shedeur, where it's, there's 14 variables that are pushing him up or down a team's board. But then there's the 15th variable, which is you don't know what other teams are doing in terms of the level of their desperation.
Frank, I'll just say real quick. I think, to be clear, this would be the best case for Shedeur also. Like, if there's any knock on most of these quarterbacks, is that they're probably not ready. I even think I would include Cam Ward in this. They're not ready to come in day one and necessarily be world beaters. If Shedeur goes somewhere where he gets to learn from somebody from a couple of years and gets to get comfortable in the league and just gets to work with the coaching staff that improves him, I honestly think that's better. Like, I think the worst case scenario for Shedeur is being thrown on a team that sucks and then having to try and be a savior. I don't think he's necessarily wired to be that. But if you're telling me he gets drafted, I don't care if it's 4th overall or in the 4th round. If you're telling me that he gets drafted and has a couple of years to sit behind somebody, I think it makes him a better quarterback when it's all said and done.
Usually, yeah. I mean, that's kind of the template now, and it's gone back and forth to play him right away. But I kind of like Shedeur as a player. I think that, and here's the thing, and I want to get back to this because so much you heard from the combine was just kind of the same stuff we heard about Caleb Williams last year and his dad, and even Jaden Daniels being upset with the Commanders bringing in multiple quarterbacks on the same visit and all this stuff. Shedeur Sanders, from all I know, I haven't done a background check on him or anything. Shedeur Sanders has never really done anything wrong. Like he carries himself very well, but he also carries himself very confidently. And it's something you said, Charles, where teams think, oh, this guy acts like he's made it already. Well, in a sense, don't you want your quarterback to be that guy? Don't you want him to come into the room and command it like that, even as a rookie? And I get it. You do have to pay your dues and all this kind of dumb stuff we deal with in the NFL. But this is just, it's a different generation. And it's a different, look at the family lineage here. Well, let's go back to 1989 when Deion Sanders, Shedeur's dad, obviously, was saying, like, Detroit can't afford me. They'd have to put me on layaway. You know, like, I mean, this is nothing new for this family. And now we laugh about that. We're like, oh, Deion Sanders, what? And that's just that family. And Deion has taught his kids, carry yourself with confidence, carry yourself like you are the best quarterback in the NFL already, right. Because but that's just how they operate. That's how this generation operates. And I hate that we're sitting here talking about this with Shedeur because, again, he's not a guy who's in the police records or anything like that.
Yeah.
He's just, he's really confident. He points at his watch for a celebration. I don't know. It's just a weird disconnect with the NFL sometimes that way.
If a team believes he is their guy, then that is all just noise. Okay. So if they're confident that he can come in, be a winning quarterback, be a starter, be a 10-year franchise cornerstone for them. Trust me, they absorb that as just a bunch of bull. Like, okay, that's just the noise. And in every draft, whether it's Shedeur or Josh Rosen or Caleb Williams or
hot tub,
Josh Allen, I mean, any of these players, you're always going to be able to find someone to grouse, right? You're always going to be able to find somebody to grouse about a prospect, particularly a prospect that is confident, which will come through as confidence to some people and arrogance to others. So, you know, again, that's noise. But I think what separates this in terms of what really matters for teams is, again, it's the football assessment. And as much as you like Shedeur, and I think a lot of people like what Shedeur was able to accomplish at Colorado, when they weigh him against, let's say, Cam Ward, right? And you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, especially if we're an AFC team, for the Cleveland Browns, if we're the Tennessee Titans at number 1, we are in a conference where it's Mount Everest, right? We're looking at of quarterbacks. We're in the Mount Everest conference. We have, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. It's an endless list of, Justin Herbert, just the quarterbacks you're going to run into.
Burrow, Stroud,
Burrow, Stroud, maybe Drake May. Like, it's like all these quarterbacks. Right. And so you're sitting there and you're going, okay, we're the Titans and we're going to take a swing. And we're going to look at Cam Ward and we're going to say, went from incarnate word, he goes to Washington State, he goes to Miami, gets better at every single stop. We think his upside is far in excess of Shedeur Sanders. And we have to spend a draft pick here. And this, I think, applies as well for Cleveland if both of these teams or if both of these players are on the board when they make their pick. Are you going to go, let me take Shedeur, who is what we think of the lesser athlete with the lesser arm, who performed well and has confidence, but we also think he's a little topped out. We think, maybe his upside it's capped a little bit. Whereas we look at Cam Ward and we say better arm, better athlete, has a penchant for playing hero ball at times, which can be a great thing if you can whittle it down into moments rather than entire expanses of games or months or whatever. I think teams are going to lean into, especially in the AFC, you're like, hey, we got to go after. If I'm Mike Borgonzi, and I'm the general manager of the Titans, I'm like, I just stared at Patrick Mahomes for years.
Right.
I know what I got to go get to beat
my
this
beef
guy.
necessarily isn't Cam Ward. Cam Ward should probably be the first pick of the draft. Like I think he is a better quarterback than Shedeur. It's just like the talk of like Shedeur being late first. I'm like, really? Why? Because I see a very accurate quarterback who, I mean, maybe he is tapped out. Maybe I'm just too into like what he did at Colorado, which was very impressive without a great offensive line in front of him or anything like that. But I see the flaws. I just get stumbled up on the whole like, oh, he went to the combine and he was way too confident. Like, I guess, whatever.
So
like we do this every year.
I got two things on this. Number one, with Cam Ward, if the Titans don't look at Cam Ward and think, man, if everything breaks right and we do our jobs the right way, he can be on that same Mount Rushmore, then you don't take him first overall. Like, I know that the concept is you can't win if you have Will Levis as your quarterback, and y'all know how I feel about Will Levis. But let's be very clear here. If you don't believe that Cam Ward can be in the same echelon, properly coached, as Lamar and Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, all those names, then you don't take him first. Because just because you need the quarterback doesn't mean that you spend that pick on a quarterback. You just gotta wait until you find somebody you believe you can coach into that echelon. And then when it comes to the swagger part of it, I've got a group text with a couple of former players that are now in media. And I asked this question: why are people freaking out about Shedeur's swagger when they seem to love it on somebody like Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, for example? And the answer I got clearly was that the league doesn't like it when your swagger doesn't match your production. And at the end of the day, while Shedeur has been a very good quarterback, he has not been an epic quarterback. And if he walks into the room and gives teams the sense that he feels he's an epic quarterback and they don't believe his tape backs that up, that's when they start to look at it as, wow, we've got an ego issue. You can have that level of swagger if you're walking in and you are the most highly regarded quarterback we've seen in years. So I think there's a fine line for teams, and everybody wants to make it this big, deep thing. But I mean, honestly, I love Shedeur's confidence. That's fine. I think Shedeur's tape is pretty good. Great confidence and pretty good tape don't align for a lot of NFL teams.
There's an element here, too, though, to hit on the first point you made about if you don't believe this is a player that can kind of be on Mount Everest with these other quarterbacks, you don't take him. That's a very specific belief to each individual team too, right? And I'll point out, Bo Nix was the conversation we were having last year, where it's like, he's not a first round pick. I had teams that are going, he's not a first round pick. He's not a third round pick. He might be a fourth round pick, based on how we assess him. And then you had Sean Payton, who's like, off. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm good. He's my guy. Yeah. I believe in him. He fits what I do. And I will take him and I'll Sherpa his ass up the mountain. Okay. Like, we'll get there. I will be able to transform him into something where he will be able to compete with a Lamar Jackson. He will be able to compete with a Patrick Mahomes. He will be able to compete in the AFC West. And if your coach is right and he's smart and knows what he's doing, and there are a handful of these guys in the league that have this reputation, then you just got to kind of accept it. So I would say when it comes to a guy like Shedeur, if you're the Browns, you're sitting there at 2, and let's play the game for a second and say, okay, Cam Ward goes off 1. Whether it's to the Titans, let's say the Giants make the strong move to the top of the board and draft him.
By the way, real quick, because I keep hearing about this. How much do you think it costs to move up? Because I don't think the cost is some Bryce Young. I mean, Bryce Young hasn't worked out that way, but we all know that the Panthers paid through the nose to get Bryce Young. Do you think it's the same kind of price to move up to get Cam Ward? I don't think so.
I don't think so, but I do think where you're moving from matters, because if you're the Titans, you want a shot. You want a shot at Abdul Carter, you want a shot at Travis Hunter, and if you're sitting there at 3, you're like, we're going to get a shot at one of the 2 guys that grades out highest across the entire league when you look at boards.
It's a lot different than if like Seattle wants to come up and get him.
Absolutely. Yeah. If it's like, okay, well, geez, we got to slide all the way back to the Raiders pick. That's a completely different situation, because you're like, now we're taking ourselves out of the realm of
Travis
easy first round grades with Abdul and Travis Hunter.
And there's not many first round grades as we've talked about a lot of times.
Yeah. So just to direct it back to Cleveland for a second here, because I think that's really this, when we talk about Shedeur being the story of the draft, it probably will begin at Cleveland at 2, right? That's where we'll start to say, is this where he goes off? And if he doesn't go off at 2, then it's like, okay, now it's a scramble, Joe. Where's he going to land? Look, let's play it out for a second. say Cleveland doesn't move up to 1, say Cam Ward comes off at 1 to the Titans or the Giants or whoever. Now you're sitting there at 2, and you have Kevin Stefanski, and he says, hey, maybe he's assessed differently elsewhere. It's like the Sean Payton, Bo Nix thing again. Maybe he's assessed different elsewhere, but he fits my offense. I really like how this fits in perfectly with what I like to do. He's going to complete a high percentage of passes. We're not going to ask him to do a lot of crazy stuff. We don't need him to be overly athletic. Hey, we play in the AFC North. We need quarterbacks who can play in the weather because we're going to go to Baltimore, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh in December. We need players who are tough, who can take hits. He's done that at Colorado. We've seen it. We need guys that are going to need to be cocky. He's got that. Because he's coming to Cleveland and all he's going to hear is the litany of quarterbacks that have failed. Yeah, right. We need a guy who goes, I don't care. I don't care about that list. I don't care about the jersey that pops up every year with all the pin names of the quarterbacks that have failed in Cleveland. And I think Shedeur is that kid. He wouldn't care. He'd go, yeah, whatever. That's not me. I'm not going to be on that jersey. So, if that's the case, then ultimately that's what changes the dynamic, just like it changed the dynamic for Bo Nix. If Bo Nix doesn't get selected by the Broncos at 12, who knows where he goes in that draft? And who knows how his 2024 plays out, which, by the way, was exquisite under Sean Payton. And Sean Payton was completely right to go, that's my guy. He works with me, and I don't care what anybody else thinks.
Absolutely. By the way, real quick, on this whole notion of the Browns and what they do, I think the mentality is changing. You talked about that with Atlanta, where I could see franchises being like, yeah, we drafted Shedeur at number 2, and we have the number 1 pick of the draft next year. We'll just get another quarterback. We're just going to get this right. We don't care. We're sick of, we're not going to waste 5 years on Shedeur Sanders. We are just going to think about this differently than everybody else. I don't know if it's going to get that extreme, but I think the mentality of quarterback is changing, and that might affect, because it used to be, right, if you draft a quarterback at 2, that's your guy for the next 5 years. I think that might be changing too. I think it might be like, whatever, we don't care anymore. We just need to get the quarterback position right. Look what happened with Minnesota. They got it right. Who cares? Atlanta, they got it right. Who cares? We're going to think about this differently.
Yeah, I think also, guys, I've said how many times, I don't necessarily think Bo Nix is Bo Nix without Sean Payton. One advantage we should at least consider here is that if you believe in your coach, Tennessee has a coach that obviously has experience working with quarterbacks. Cleveland has a coach that has experience working with quarterbacks. The Giants, Vegas. So you've got 4 teams picking in the top 6 that have at least something in place that is found that feels like they're quarterback whispering type places, right? So if you're a Titans fan, part of your hope comes, hey, if they're drafting Cam Ward, it's because Callahan has looked around and said, I know what it takes to be a great quarterback. Stefanski drafting I feel much better about Stefanski drafting a quarterback than I would about Aaron Glenn, because we have no idea what that looks like. We have no idea institutionally what that looks like. So I will say, to counter my own argument, I constantly say that I think part of the reason Bo is so good is because of Sean Payton. There are several teams picking in the top 10 this year that believe they have somebody as a coach that can get the most out of the quarterback position.
Yeah, it's funny because we have, in a way, the inverse of last year's situation, where we had teams with all these defensive head coaches that were going to be taking, these quarterbacks. That's and we're fair. Like, man, he's going, Caleb's going to Chicago with Eberflus. Like, they've had issues there. Like, that's probably not, from a coaching standpoint scenario. It'd be great if he was an offensive coach, and Eberflus obviously wasn't. That didn't turn out great. Jaden Daniels goes to Washington, and Dan Quinn's the head coach, but it was a little different there because you had Cliff Kingsbury. That rub was a little different. The Patriots, right? We saw how that ultimately unfolded with the Patriots. Again, you have a defensive staff, a defensive head coach. It goes poorly, and now the coach has been swapped out. This is different this year, right? You have Callahan, who, as Fitz said, has got a long history of working with some great quarterbacks. You have Brian Daboll, who's got a history. You've got Pete Carroll, who's got a history. You have Kevin Stefanski, who's got a history. It's all these offensive minds who, by the way, have, Pete had his flowers as head coach. Stefanski, not a Super Bowl, but he's had his flowers a couple of seasons, cranking out some great seasons.
Coach of the year, right?
Yeah, even Daboll, had his flowers when he's working with Josh Allen in Buffalo. So it's funny how the super strong quarterback draft ends up in the hands of defensive coaches, and then the weaker class now ends up in the hands of offensive coaches. But that might be the good thing, because that's what the weaker class needs.
Yeah, go earn your damn money. If you're a quarterback whisperer, then go earn your money. Let me ask you this: what about, because we're talking so much about Shedeur, what about his teammate Travis Hunter, who a month ago everybody thought could end up being the first overall pick in the draft? Have you gotten any sense, C-Rob, on where teams actually peg him at this point?
It's Andrew Berry came out and said at the combine he considers him a wide receiver, and I thought
that was crazy. I thought that was wow. I was surprised.
Stunned. Well, all it told me was, I was like, okay, I guess he's not taking him at 2. Like, I don't think you're going to take a wide receiver at the second overall pick, especially when you have quarterback needs. I think that there's still a lot of disagreement on Travis. I will say this: I don't think he's going to Cleveland at 2. I do think there's a possibility that he ends up with the Giants at 3, depending on how their quarterback, situation works out and what else is available there at 3. I think it's possible maybe the Titans could move back to 3 and take him. I think the Patriots, almost no doubt in my mind, unless Abdul Carter is also there for them at 4, there's almost no doubt in my mind that they would take Travis Hunter. And I think the Patriots consider Travis Hunter to be a corner. Once you get to 4, I don't ask anyone past 4, because I'm like, he won't be there past 4. I just don't see it. I don't see a world in which Travis Hunter isn't coming off the board at 4. So in that top 4, we know Cleveland sees him as a wide receiver. I think I can confidently say I believe New England sees him as a corner. I think the Giants, I think, is still up in the air. And the Titans, I think it's still up in the air.
Do you think the Patriots see him as a cornerback who could also play some receiver, or just you? Okay. Because I've been railing about this, that I think teams that close off their mind to that are just, then why draft Travis Hunter? Like, he's a good corner, very good corner, but he's not a guy you draft 4th overall if he is just going to be a cornerback.
Yeah, I mean, I think they see him as a full-time corner who you would have, multiple offensive packages for him as a wide receiver. And maybe you're looking at 15, 20 snaps at wide receiver, which might be honestly all he needs to really make a really big impact.
Make 3-4 plays a game. No other quarterback in the NFL is doing that.
If you give him, if you give him 20 snaps and he gets 5 targets out of that 20 snaps, he's probably catching 4 of those targets. Right. And who knows what that looks like?
Yeah,
I mean, that could be 80
yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, right. Like he's that good. He's done it before. So I'm glad to, because I don't like, the one thing I don't want is somebody to draft Travis Hunter and be like, you are going to play one way because that's the way we play in the NFL. Like, open your mind. Like, let's get creative. And it doesn't work after year 1. Okay, you got a really good, probably Pro Bowl cornerback in the future.
Let's be real, Frank. Like, teams are greedy in the face of success. So when they bring him in, if he comes in and let's say it's the Patriots and he goes out and Drake May's best drives are when Travis Hunter is on the field,
right?
There will be a conversation about, hey, Drake's pretty important to us. His development is pretty important to us. And this guy seems like he clicks with Drake the way Jamar Chase clicks with Joe Burrow, the way Justin Jefferson has clicked with a couple of different quarterbacks. I think then the conversation becomes, maybe we redial how we're looking at this. And he is more of a wide receiver than a cornerback for us. And conversely, maybe goes out as a corner and he gets burned. Maybe there are problems initially and you go, okay, well, we really got to focus on the other side of the football and see what we can find there. I think wherever he looks like he's a stellar success, wherever he looks like he's an all-pro, that's the position he's going to ultimately end up playing. And I don't think any team that drafts him won't at least consider both sides of the ball and see exactly where he's going.
Yeah, and I think letting it remain fluid is important. Like, I would give a team a lot of credit for letting it be fluid once he gets on the practice field and into games. All right, so way too early. Again, the bosses haven't really confirmed this, but I'm just going to tell the world that we're doing a draft live stream again. We'll be together on it, I'm presuming. I don't know. I'm just holding the boss's feet to the fire on that. So with that spirit, let's go ahead and go around the horn. We'll predict the top 3 picks as of March 7th. Don't at me like if this turns out to be wildly different. We got a lot of time left before the draft, so sit down, shut up, and color in your book before you hit at on anything when you don't like this. C-Rob, I'll let you go first. The first pick in the draft, Tennessee Titans, Charles Robinson believes will be. So this is who you think right now, as of right now, who you think they'll select, not who you would select, who you think they'll select. Charles, who do you got first to Tennessee?
I'm going to say it's Cam Ward until I know what the response is inside that building to the quarterback situation, until I see in free agency what exactly they do. I think it's going to be Cam Ward. If they go out and they sign a mid-level potential starter to go in and compete with Levis, then I change my pick. But until that happens, I think Cam Ward has to be taken by the Titans because they have to resolve that situation.
Frank, first pick of the draft?
I want to say that because if you don't have a quarterback, you got to try. But I think the Giants are going to be really, really, really aggressive and overpay. So I think Cam Ward goes number 1, but I think he goes to the Giants at number 1. I think the Titans trade down 2 spots.
Okay. I don't think the Giants will pay enough to move up because I just don't think it's going to be as robust as people think. I think that the Titans telling us that they're not going to pass on a generational talent, and I also think all of these rumors about teams trading up are being fed by the Titans. I think the Titans are trying to drum up more interest. As a result, I think the Titans are stuck at the end of this. They don't get an offer that really feels home runny. They don't want to move all the way down to 6 or 7. I think the Titans stick at 1, and I think they take Abdul Carter. How do you like that? I think they take the best pass rusher on the board, not Cam Ward. So that means with the second pick in the draft, I'll go first here because it impacts that. Cleveland, in my mind, takes Cam Ward. I think if Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, if any of these guys have 2 years to develop, we have a much different conversation. I feel bad for them because it's not Cam Ward's fault. He's being drafted 2 overall. I don't necessarily love 2 overall for Cam Ward, frankly, but the Browns have to get somebody in, and financially, the draft is about the only way that makes sense considering what they're paying out. So I think the Browns are stuck taking a quarterback. They take Cam Ward, which I don't think is going to work out for the best for the player of the team as much as I hope I'm wrong. So, C-Rob, you've already got Cam Ward off the board. Who do you have number 2 to Cleveland?
I think that this Myles Garrett situation is not going to resolve itself. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I think that the Browns are probably going to end up getting some solid offers for Myles Garrett. And in my mind, there is a very, I don't want to say high percentage, but at least a mid percentage chance that Myles Garrett gets traded going into that draft and thus creates a need at defensive end. And I think that the Browns can address quarterback later in this draft. I think they can go get someone in free agency, whether that's a Kirk Cousins or another veteran. They've created some cap room. So I'm going to say Abdul Carter, 2 to the Cleveland Browns.
Now, by the way, that would be a home run for Cleveland. Frank, what do you got?
I'm just going to give him Shedeur. I just think when you're the Cleveland Browns and you're looking and you're saying, how do we dig out of this mess at quarterback? How do we mend fences with Myles Garrett? Well, part of it is figuring out a plan at quarterback. And I like Shedeur Sanders. I think he's going to be a good, solid quarterback. I think he's Bo Nix. Like, I think that you put him with the right, like you talked about C-Rob, like, I think Stefanski would be a great fit for him. I think that they would do well together. I'll go Shedeur, number 2 to the Browns, because I just don't think when you're the Cleveland Browns stuck with this Deshaun Watson mess, I just don't think you pass up on a quarterback who you think would fit pretty well with your head coach.
I also, just to give you a hot take here, we say all the time that you have to win when you have a quarterback on a rookie contract, which I think is antiquated logic, as I've said many times. But I will say this, we are reaching the spot when you look at the contract that Max Crosby was just given and what's about to happen to edge rushers, where you're going to have to win with your edge rusher on a rookie contract as well. Right, yeah. Like the edge rushers at this point are making quarterback money. So the concept of getting Abdul Carter and not paying Myles Garrett, as much as I think Myles Garrett is worth everything he ever wants, I understand from a financial standpoint where you're looking at it and saying, hey, the quarterback isn't here. Let's at least get the edge rusher of the future and save ourselves a little bit of cash on that side. Like I think that's going to become more and more the logic as these contracts go up and down. So C-Rob, then who do you have going 3 overall? Because you have the Giants on the clock. Who do you have going 3 there?
So Ward 1 with the Titans, 2 Abdul Carter with the Cleveland Browns, and I think number 3. My assessment now on March 7th. Before seeing free agency, which, by the way, will change these assessments. So I'm staring at the producers going, I know you're going to clip this out, and it's going to sound like I'm making a declarative statement.
Just keep this in the clip. Keep the
on
caveat
March 7th.
in the clip.
Yeah, this is going to change in free agency. But I would put Travis Hunter at 3 to the New York Giants again, I think from the perception right now, I do see maybe not a monumental Shedeur Sanders slide, but at least somewhat a change at the top, from what we've been seeing, this idea of him being a top 2 pick. I think maybe that changes as we move forward and we see some of these QB needing teams address their situations with veterans and thinking we can come back later and address quarterback in this draft at a value that matches up more with the talent and the grade on the player, rather than pushing a guy to the top of our board just because we need it. We can go get a Jackson Dart or someone else later in this draft in accordance to what we actually value them at.
Because that always works out. Those mid-round quarterbacks hit at such a high rate that you just.
I mean, those first-round quarterbacks,
third round, they're going to work.
Look, I don't believe in these quarterbacks, so I'll say I had Abdul Carter number 1, I had Cam Ward number 2, begrudgingly. I have Travis Hunter number 3 to the Giants. I don't think Shedeur goes there. So Frank, you now would have the Titans on the clock because you've had the Giants trade up. And
they would run the card up for Abdul Carter. I mean, Abdul Carter's a heck of a player. Don't get me wrong. I think Abdul Carter is the best player regardless of position in this draft. And if we are sitting here at draft, that's why I think this trade is going to happen between 3 and 1. Because I think the Titans could look at this and say, all right, even if we know that the Giants are coming up to 1 to get a quarterback. Like that's the only reason you would do that trade. So, okay, but even if the Browns draft Abdul Carter 2, we could draft Travis Hunter 3 and feel pretty good about it. Or we could hit the lottery here and hit Abdul Carter at number 3 and collect those extra picks. That's why I think this is going to happen. I think that, and in that scenario, I think the Titans would feel really, really good to say, yeah, okay, we don't got a quarterback yet, but whatever. We stink right now anyway. It's going to take us a while. We got extra picks. We got a guy we think is the best player of the draft, one of those Myles Garrett type edge rushers. So yes, I think the Titans would sprint the pickup to draft Abdul Carter at 3.
I would just quickly say, gentlemen, you will see me celebrate on draft night if Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are both off the board before 6. That's all I'm saying. Just avoids the whole conversation from my favorite team.
You wouldn't talk yourself into Cam Ward at 6? Like, Cam Ward at 6 would be a good deal for the Raiders. Like,
no,
Shedeur,
Cam Ward at 6
too.
Cam Ward at 6 would be a really good deal if they have somebody else that they're going to play and they're going to wait 2 years to play him. Cam Ward's not going to be at 6, and I definitely don't want. Part of this is I don't want the Raiders to trade up to 1 for Cam Ward. So I'm just letting you know.
Fitz.
Like that's.
What if the Raiders trade for Geno Smith?
I'm fine with Geno.
What if they go and acquire Geno Smith and they give him a contract that really is probably in terms of guaranteed money ends up being like a 2-year deal, and he reunites with Pete? Maybe they try to get Metcalf too, although I don't know if that's possible to do both guys. But what would you think of them trading for Geno, and then if a quarterback gets to them at 6, either Cam or Shedeur, you go, we're going to take this guy and we're going to sit him behind Geno for a couple of years.
If you trade for Geno, the thing that he gives you at 6, or whatever team trades for him that needs a quarterback, is flexibility. You're no longer beholden to the board just because you need a quarterback. So I think any team that trades for Geno right now should do a whole parade for it. Not because Geno is going to turn out to be a world beater, but because it lets you at 6 make an honest decision. At 4, make an honest decision. Not a press decision for what you need at quarterback, but an honest decision of, hey, is the quarterback anywhere near the best player available quotient of this board? And I don't believe the answer to that's going to be yes. I think if the Raiders or the Giants were to turn around and acquire Geno Smith, the brilliance of it is then it lets you decide that, hey, you're going to wait till the 2nd round. Maybe trade back into the bottom of the 1st round. You're going to wait at the quarterback position. I think that's a brilliant strategy. Again, these are like, I'll bring little bags of confetti and I will throw the confetti in the air for any of these scenarios. I can't afford the bag of confetti unless we pay the bill. So we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to figure out what's next for Sam Darnold. Okay, so we've had all this conversation about quarterbacks and we have yet to say Sam Darnold, which I think is probably a violation of our contract. So let's say Sam Darnold now and figure out what the hell's going on with him. No franchise tag, but let's start here. The Vikings still, according to some people, think that they want to keep working on a deal. Like, C-Rob, what is actually happening with Sam Darnold right now?
Yeah, that's true. I think the Vikings are leaving the door open. And I think Darnold's camp is leaving the door open for a potential return to Minnesota on not a long-term deal, but a short-term deal. And I think the reason for that is I think the Vikings assess his market's going to be softer than many of us thought. And I've talked to multiple people across the league, and I get the same perception. It's going to be a softer market than what we initially thought. That Baker Mayfield deal out there, let's say a $40 million annual average with $100 million in guaranteed money, may not be out there for Sam Darnold. And you may get into this scenario where it's more in line with like 30, and the deals are really only guaranteed through 2 years. So it's like if Sam Darnold suddenly is floating out there and he's looking around and he's saying, okay, there's some deals I can do. They're really 2-year deals. The guaranteed money is really in the range of like, 50 or 60. Where does this put me? And by the way, these teams that are offering me these deals are not great. It's a tough situation that I'd be heading into. I think then at that point, Darnold turns back to the Vikings and says, okay, let's have this talk. What realistically could I end up doing with the Minnesota Vikings? And there's definitely people who feel like could be a 1-year deal for say 25 to 30 million with Minnesota, or a 1 year with another, second option for an additional year with Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings, which not only gives the Vikings runway to find out if Darnold's best moments in 2024 are really more representative than the last 2 games of the 2024 season for him, but also gives them runway to see how JJ McCarthy's coming along, because he's missed all this time with the meniscus repair. And then, he lost weight. He had to put the weight back on, but he lost all these snaps. He got the mental reps. He did travel with the team. He did all these things, but he just didn't get any of the on-field work. So really, he's a rookie all over again, and a rookie who's rehabbing. I think the one scenario here that I think you have to consider, okay, it's 2 scenarios. One scenario is the desperate team. Is there a team out there who loses out on every single option that they had on the table? Let's say it's the Giants, and they're going, we can't get to 1. Like this is going to cost.
And they're going to get fired if they go 4-13 again.
And they're absolutely going to get fired. And they want to win games in 2025. And all of a sudden, Joe Shane, the general manager, and Brian Daboll, the head coach, are looking at each other going, not our money. And if it goes wrong, we're not going to be here anyway. So let's just give them the money. Let's pay him. Let's do the 4-year, $160 million deal with $100 million in guaranteed money. Let's just go ahead and do that now and get him in here. And if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. And it was the best shot we had available to us. So that's one, is the idea of the desperate team that does not have any of its options, and it decides to give him the market rate deal. And then number 2, I think it's the mystery team. There are teams out there that weren't going to do a ton of work on this, have deep conversations in their buildings until they knew for sure he was available for nothing, meaning we don't have to trade for him. He didn't get tagged. We don't have to send a pick. We can just go ahead and sign him in free agency and make our bid. Is there a team out there that we don't readily see that all of a sudden has a quarterback opening, or creates a quarterback opening where then they pursue Sam Darnold? Is it like a Seattle where they go, okay, hey, the Raiders are interested in Geno. Pete wants to reunite with him and we can get something out of this. Let's go ahead and do that now. And then they pivot and go, now we have the Sam Darnold talk. Is Sam Darnold, or obviously you have the talk before you would deal Geno. But so I think the idea of it's the desperate team and the mystery team that I think leads Sam Darnold elsewhere. But if you ask me what the odds on favorite is, I think when you talk to people across the league, the odds on favorite is him ending up and returning to Minnesota for at least a 1-year deal through 2025.
Don't you think that's really risky for Darnold? I see when you talk about that scenario, and I agree with you that's perfectly on the table right now with how everything's shaken out. Like, let's say 1 year, $30 million. Okay. Isn't all of the risk there on Darnold and none on the Vikings? Because Darnold could not be their starter by Halloween. I mean, what if JJ McCarthy balls out in the preseason? Darnold struggles a little bit early in September. You're like, well, this kid was 10th pick of the draft. That was our plan anyway. Let's do that. Who cares? I just view this as so risky for Darnold to just, okay, I'm going to take a 1-year deal, because what if the pumpkin did strike midnight last year in Detroit in week 18?
It's the risk. Frank, it's the risk assessment, though. He has to assess, okay, I could get 2 years. All depends on what he's offered elsewhere. If he's offered a 2-year deal elsewhere, and the guaranteed money is really only in the neighborhood, and I say only with, let's be real, but like, let's say it's $50 to $60 million in guaranteed money, but he has Minnesota and it's 1 year for 30. And on top of that 1 year for 30, he gets Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Kevin O'Connell.
True.
He gets his left tackle who comes back. He gets a running back depth that's going to be added to this offseason. And he sits there and says, yeah, okay, so I'm going to take my 1 for 30 because this is my best possible shot. Because guess what? Everywhere else I've been, the trap door has opened underneath me. And
Right.
I've never had a season like I just had. I'm going to bet on myself. And if I hit, either the Vikings go, okay, we got it. Let's roll out the big deal.
4
Or-
years, 170, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I re-enter the market the way I could have entered the market had my last 2 games not gone completely south. I go back into the market. And once again, we're talking about I'm a $50 million a year quarterback. Because again, what is Darnold right now? 27?
28. I think he's 28.
27.
28, 29,
He'll be
whatever.
28
He's-
when,
yeah,
when this. He'll be
Okay.
28 when the season starts.
Yeah. I mean, he's free agency next year. He's still a absolute bona fide. If he balls out, he's an absolute bona fide star who you come in and you pay, and then now you're talking about he's going to get 50 million plus a season. And we're going to be talking about guarantees in, I don't know, 170, 180 million dollars, maybe
And
more.
I mean,
No.
even C-Rob, even if he goes in this year, like let's say he works out a $30 million deal in Minnesota. I'm just playing playful money here. $25-30 million. And he sucks. He's still going to make 15 million as a backup somewhere next year. So you combine those two deals together. Like Frank, I guess my counter to the risk of him not getting to play is the risk of him playing somewhere where it looks like he's washed. Like he goes to a really bad football team and he's terrible. He's going to get cut and then he's basically going to be done in this league. So like he's going to be just a weird backup. So I mean, if I'm Sam Darnold, I've waited my whole life for people to get off my back about where I was drafted. I've waited for my whole life to be accepted for the player I am. The one thing I don't want to do is start answering those questions again, especially if I look around, I'm like, well, my coaching staff is incompetent and they're not putting in the right system to help me succeed. All the things that happen with bad football teams. So like the first question I'm asking as Sam Darnold is this coach at least on par with KOC and that entire Vikings staff? Are they going to be able to put in an offense that I trust as much as that Viking staff? Do they have the weapons that will let me succeed? And if you keep going down the list and you like check them off and say, no, it just isn't there. I mean, the devil you know versus the devil you don't has to have some power.
That does.
And
by
Frank,
the way, that would be a grand slam for the Vikings. A 1 year, let's say 1 year, 30 million. I think that's perfect for the Vikings, by the way.
In that offense that is run there, O'Connell is running that Shanahan, McVay, that whole offense.
Mm-hmm.
Quarterbacks get better in year 2. Like they're like the real mastery of what they're doing actually does occur in year 2. Now you could argue, well, he was already running a version of it in San Francisco as a backup, so really wasn't last year his second year. Sure, and maybe that's why he played well. He's going to get better in year 3, and so there's that aspect of him saying, I may actually play better in 2025 than I did in 2024 because I'm more familiar with the chemistry. I know the playbook better. I walk to the line of scrimmage with a multitude of plays in my back pocket now. And then you have to consider the factor of Sam Darnold having been through career situations where it was horrible. And I bring this story up a lot because I think it's just one of those moments where agents earn their money. When there was a player who's a first round pick, he gets drafted. It was an edge rusher. He petered out, not play well. Right. And he was a big bust and everybody was killing him. And he, his 5th year option did get picked up. He ends up leaving. Right. He goes to another team, hits it big there, plays really, really well, but he's on a short-term deal, but he's re-entering free agency again after, I think it was like a 1 year deal. He re-enters free agency, but he just had a huge season with this team. And I remember talking to this agent and he's like, yeah, we're going to get some offers with a little more money elsewhere, but I'm going to keep him where he is. And I'm like, why? Like, don't just go take the money, right? He's like, no, because he's great where he is. He could get 2 more contracts where he is. He could have another 10 years on his career where he is right now. That's my responsibility, is to keep him on track where it works and where he can have more bites at the apple or, hey, take a little more money elsewhere and he flames out. And then everybody looks at the team he was drafted by as a rookie and says, oh, no, that's representative of what he really is. That's what Darnold kind of faces here. If he goes somewhere else and he's terrible, then it's like, he's the Jets guy. He's the Jets guy who sees ghosts. He's the guy who couldn't make it happen in Carolina. He's the guy who got, pistol whipped by the Lions and the Rams. That's who he is. And then it's over. But if he goes back to Minnesota and he hits it big, the perception is completely flipped. It's a lot to think about, and it definitely is a gamble. But we put it in such a dollars and cents kind of thing. It's all about money when we focus in on this. And maybe what we don't consider enough is the happiness of the player going,
that's very fair.
I've been at the bottom. I don't ever want to be at the bottom again. These guys held me up in the locker room after I won a game. A locker room held me up and they all celebrated. That's where I want to be. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to beat it. The system this time. I'm going to be the guy who does it.
Okay, I want to ask you guys a would you rather question that involves Sam Darnold and a bunch of teams in the draft. We'll do that after we take a quick break. Frank, C-Rob, let's play a game of would you rather for a second here. Because as you guys were talking about Sam Darnold, I just kept thinking about the Giants, the Raiders, the Jets, the teams we talk about every single episode that are quarterback needy. I guess my question, because Frank, you talked earlier about the Giants moving up, paying a king's ransom to get Cam Ward. My question is, if you're the New York Football Giants or any of these teams, and you know you're going to have to pay multiple first-round picks to move up of some sort, would you rather just sign Sam Darnold for $40, $45, $50 million for a year, or 2 years, whatever that is? Would you rather get Sam Darnold in the building and keep the ability to be best player available this year in the draft and, frankly, not give up any future resources that you can use to build your team? Or would you rather avoid Sam Darnold because you're not really sure if he is the seeing ghost guy and give up what it takes to get Cam Ward? This is really a Cam Ward or a Sam Darnold conversation, Frank. Which would you rather?
You frame it that way, the answer's got to be Darnold, right? But I think it does matter that if Darnold comes in and he's the guy from the last 2 games last year, again, you're not going to have that job anymore. So what do you care about future first-round picks? I will say I wouldn't close my mind off to the answer of being both. That's where I'm at with quarterback in the NFL. I looked at what the Falcons did, as we talked about earlier in the show, and everybody made fun of them, me included. You can go back, draft night. I was like, oh, how could you do that? And, as it went on, you're like, maybe this is how teams should operate. Maybe Joe Shane should be saying, yes, we're going to pay Sam Darnold, and yes, we're going to go get Cam Ward. And if we end up with one great quarterback, we've won. We won this game. Like we figured it out finally. And so I wouldn't be close-minded to that, but if I had to choose your own adventure here, one way or another, yeah, you're right. Like I'd probably rather just pay Darnold because then you have those draft picks to build around him.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's not a Cam Ward versus Sam Darnold. It's a Cam Ward versus Sam Darnold and Travis Hunter. Cam Ward versus Sam Darnold and Abdul Carter. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would spend it. Personally, I would spend it. I would say, screw it. Let's just do it. And if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. Because there's no guarantee. If we go up and get Cam and he has a typical rookie season, like let's say a Drake May did last year, we go, 6-11 or 5-12. We're all gone anyway. Yep. So enjoy developing Cam without us.
That's the whole cloud over this. If you ask me about the Raiders, that's a different story because those guys have some time, you'd assume. I guess it could go 0-17.
Pete Carroll doesn't have a lot of time. Sorry, ages joke. Come at me.
But I think it's different for different scenarios and how much comfort you have. And hey, if this doesn't work out great this year, we'll still be back next year and we can work on it again.
And Frank, I think, throwing everything at it with the Giants, like I said, I had that conversation that, there was certainly this perception with people in the league that the Giants are going to throw everything at this and it's going to mean more than one answer. I think to me, there's a possibility that the thing that is in play, it ends up being Aaron Rodgers, who you go and you basically give him a 1-year deal and then you make the move and you go and you get Cam Ward because you think there's some aspects of their game that are kind of similar. Like he's got an arm, he's an athlete, he's got an ability to move off script. What he doesn't have is this tank of knowledge that Aaron Rodgers has. And I think Aaron Rodgers at this stage would be on board with saying, you know what? Yeah, I'm good. Let's do it. I'll mentor this kid. I'll show him. We'll talk about, all these different things. He'll develop for a year under me and we'll approach it like we approached it with Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes. I'll be the guy that gives you everything you need. And maybe I have a good year and I have an opportunity to go somewhere else again and, finish out the way I want to. Or maybe this one good year I have will be enough for me. And I'll walk into the sunset, and then I'll always be linked to Cam Ward the way that, and his future success, the way that Alex Smith is always going to be linked to Patrick Mahomes and that future success of keeping the Ferrari in the garage for one season. So I love this about this draft because there's so many different things, at least right now on March 7th, that could happen. There are going to be,
it's really fun. Yeah.
It's going to feel a little more refined in a couple of weeks after some quarterbacks have signed and moved around and free agency has occurred. It's going to sharpen a little of this picture.
Legal tampering opens in a few days. Do you believe Sam Darnold will have a decision made within the first 24 hours like we so often see with the biggest names, C-Rob? Or do you think that this is a process that draws out?
No, I think he'll draw it a little bit. Because I think before he makes this decision, unless a team comes out of the gate hot, and let's say it's the Giants, unless there is the desperation team that just comes out and says, we're going to give you that deal that you would have gotten if, as Frank said, you didn't finish those last 2 games and you were just okay, we would have given you this deal regardless. Like to us, you're the player before you hit the Lions and Rams games. We're going to pay you like you were that player. Then I think it happens fast. But to me, I think what we're going to see, and man, I could be completely wrong on this, and it's just how it goes. But what I think we're going to see is Sam Darnold sit there and go, let me look at all my options first. Let me talk to the Vikings. Let me see what's on the table for me and what's best for me. So I think it'll be a few days at the very least before we even know where Sam Darnold's really even leaning.
I probably agree with that. The one thing I would like to say about legal tampering is I can't wait for the inevitable. This guy signed the largest deal for a defensive end in NFL history, and it's like 4 minutes and 48 seconds into the legal tampering period. Like, wow, these agents work really fast. I just love that. I love how we're like, it's like 6 minutes into free agency, and somebody has signed the largest deal for a position in history. It's so good.
Let's
so
listen.
Good.
Guys, the legal tampering period is the combine. Let's be
real.
real.
That's right. That's why it's so hilarious. It's been that way for years and years and years. Yeah. A lot of this has already worked out. Yes.
We should just call it the legal tampering period, brought to you by the combine that happened a couple weeks ago.
Look, I love every answer. Here's Stone, by the way, does God's work producing this show and does great work every single week. Stone, the deal we're just going to make, C-Rob, is if Sam Darnold signs in 4 minutes, we won't post the clip on social of anything C-Rob just said. If, though, we're like 2 days in and there's no decision and people are freaking out, then we clip it, we post it, and that way, we give C-Rob some flowers for being right.
I love the clips that make me look good.
It's a risk.
I know they're hard to find.
I don't like
they're
those.
hard to find.
I like the ones that make us look as foolish as possible. Usually more me than you, but the ones where we can make you, that's always fun. Yeah, Sam Darnold signing 3 minutes. No, Sam Darnold signing 3 minutes into free agency. Then I want the clip of Charles like, "This is going to take a while, guys." Okay. All right.
I tried to protect you, C-Rob, and all of a sudden Frank's over here just trying to create, like, Frank's going to be tweeting you like, C-Rob, what do you have to say now? Like, we're going to take this beef fully to social media.
I'll give you the clip add-on, right now. So if he signs like 3 minutes in, here you can just go ahead and add this in. Are you serious? Are you? Oh my God. I hate this show.
Oh man, we should just clip that audio off and start every inside coverage with. Are you serious? I hate this show. Follow us on social media. We'll be back next week. Obviously, it's a huge week. Free agency is here. And look, I'm just going to keep pinning the bosses in. We'll see if they notice. We're doing a draft live stream. So says I. And we'll figure it out. So, we'll keep this draft talk coming to you until then. At Charles Robinson, at Yahoo Schwab, at Jason Fitz. You know where to find us. Rate, review, subscribe. Tell your friends, family, and enemies to hang out with us every single week. Means the world to us that you give us the time. Enjoy your weekend. And remember, only listen to the parts that it just emphasize how right Rob was. Anything else, just totally ignore it. Forget it ever happened. Thanks for hanging out with us.